Most people never noticed the child standing quietly near the pharmacy door, but on that chilly Thursday afternoon, one little boy was about to stop a man whose name appeared on the side of office towers and magazine covers across America. Ethan Carter stepped out of a black SUV and adjusted the cuff of his tailored jacket as his driver pulled away from the curb. At 39 years old, he was the CEO of one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country, and his schedule was planned down to the minute. He had a board call in 40 minutes, an investor dinner that evening, and absolutely no reason to be standing outside a neighborhood pharmacy in a small Pennsylvania town. Then he heard a voice. "Mr. Carter." Ethan froze. He turned around, surprised that anyone here recognized him. Standing a few feet away was a small blonde boy who couldn't have been older than 7. The child held a wrinkled paper bag against his chest and looked up at him with wide blue eyes. "Mr. Carter," the boy repeated softly, "please don't let her fall again." Ethan frowned. "Excuse me." The boy swallowed nervously and pointed toward a bench near the side of the building. Ethan followed the gesture. A woman sat there with her head lowered, one hand gripping the edge of the bench as if she were trying to steady herself. She looked exhausted. Her light brown hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and her oversized sweatshirt hung from tired shoulders. Even from a distance, Ethan could tell she was struggling. "That's my mommy," the boy said. "Her name is Olivia." Ethan glanced back at the child. "Do you know who I am?" Noah nodded immediately. "I saw your picture inside." He pointed through the pharmacy window where a healthcare magazine sat on a display rack near the entrance. Ethan almost smiled. Of all the places to be recognized, he hadn't expected this. "And why are you asking me for help?" Noah looked down at the paper bag. "Because grown-ups listen to important people." The answer hit Ethan harder than he expected. Before he could respond, Olivia slowly lifted her head. She noticed Noah talking to a stranger and immediately tried to stand. "Noah," she called, forcing a tired smile. "Come here, sweetheart." She rose too quickly and stumbled slightly before catching herself. Noah took a step toward her, worry flashing across his face. Ethan instinctively moved forward as well, but Olivia raised a hand. "I'm okay," she said quickly. "Really? Thank you." Her voice was polite, but something about it sounded rehearsed, like someone who had spent years telling people she was fine when she wasn't. Noah walked back to her side. Olivia wrapped an arm around his shoulders and looked at Ethan with embarrassment. "I'm sorry if he bothered you." Ethan shook his head. "Not at all." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Ethan noticed the paper sticking out of Noah's bag. It looked like a prescription receipt. At the top was the pharmacy logo. Below it was a handwritten note. And the moment Ethan read those few words, every thought about his meeting disappeared from his mind. The handwritten note contained only 4 words, but they immediately caught Ethan's attention. Payment declined again. He looked at the receipt a second time, wondering if he had misunderstood. Then he noticed the medication name printed beneath it. His stomach tightened. He knew that drug. In fact, he knew it better than almost anyone in America. His company manufactured it. Olivia quickly folded the receipt and slipped it back into the bag before Ethan could say anything. "Thank you for checking on us," she said politely. "But we are fine." Ethan glanced at Noah. The boy did not look convinced. Neither was he. "Are you sure?" Ethan asked. Olivia forced a smile. "Just a long day." She adjusted the strap of a worn canvas purse hanging from her shoulder. Ethan noticed how carefully she balanced herself before taking a step. It was subtle, but impossible to ignore once he saw it. Noah looked up at his mother. "Mommy, maybe we should sit a little longer." Olivia gently brushed his hair back. "We still have to catch the bus, sweetheart." Ethan checked his watch. Something inside him told him to leave. His calendar was already packed. None of this was his responsibility. Yet another part of him could not stop thinking about that receipt. "Which bus are you taking?" he asked. Olivia hesitated. "Route 12. Ethan knew the route. It ran nearly 40 minutes across town before reaching one of the older neighborhoods near the river. "That is a long ride," he said, "especially if you are not feeling well." Olivia laughed softly. It was the kind of laugh people used when they had run out of energy to explain their situation. You get used to things. For some reason, that answer stayed with him. You get used to things. Ethan thought about his own life. Private drivers, executive assistants, priority appointments. If something went wrong, 10 people rushed to fix it. Yet here was a woman treating hardship like a normal part of her day. Noah suddenly tugged on Ethan's sleeve. Can I tell you something? Ethan knelt slightly. Sure. The boy lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. Mommy always says not to worry, but she has been saying that a lot lately. Olivia's face turned red. Noah, I am just telling the truth, he replied. Ethan could see the embarrassment in her eyes. More than that, he could see pride. She clearly did not want sympathy. She did not want charity. Whatever she was dealing with, she wanted to handle it herself. A city bus appeared at the far end of the street. Noah spotted it first. There it is. Olivia exhaled with relief. She stood carefully and took his hand. Come on, sweetheart. Before they walked away, Ethan spoke again. Miss Brooks. Olivia stopped. Yes. Would you mind if I asked a few questions about that prescription? The expression on her face changed instantly. Not fear. Not anger. Something closer to disappointment. As if she had expected this moment eventually. She looked directly at him for the first time and said 6 words that made Ethan even more curious. I already tried every option available. The bus doors opened with a soft hiss, but Olivia did not move. For a few seconds, she simply stood there holding Noah's hand, as though she were deciding whether to walk away or say something she normally kept to herself. The driver waited patiently. A couple of passengers stepped around them and climbed aboard. Ethan could see the conflict in her eyes. Finally, Olivia looked down at Noah and gave him a small nod. Go ahead and find us a seat near the front. Noah smiled and hurried onto the bus. Once he was out of earshot, Olivia turned back toward Ethan. You should not waste your time on this, she said quietly. People have already tried to help. Ethan folded his arms. Then why does the receipt say payment declined again? Olivia let out a slow breath. For the first time, she seemed too tired to pretend everything was fine. Because insurance stopped covering part of the treatment 6 months ago. Ethan listened carefully. And the assistance programs? A faint smile crossed her face. You really do know this medication. I know every program attached to it. Olivia looked away toward the pharmacy window. I applied for all of them. Ethan frowned. All of them. Every single one. The answer bothered him. The assistance programs were one of the things his company proudly advertised. They were supposed to prevent situations exactly like this. Then something does not add up, he said. Olivia laughed softly. That is what everyone says. The bus driver leaned out the door. Ma'am, are you getting on? Olivia raised a finger. 1 minute. Then she looked back at Ethan. Do you want to know what really happened? Ethan nodded. The application was approved. That caught him off guard. Approved? For 3 months. She paused. Then the funding ran out. Ethan stared at her. That should not have happened. The program budget was enormous. At least that was what every report claimed. Olivia reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. The corners were worn from being opened too many times. She handed it to him. Ethan unfolded the letter. The logo at the top belonged to his company. Halfway down the page, one sentence jumped out at him. Due to limited funding availability, assistance benefits cannot be renewed at this time. Ethan read it twice. Then a third time. The words suddenly felt heavier than paper. Olivia slipped her hands into her sweatshirt pockets. I am not angry anymore, she said. Being angry takes energy. Ethan looked up. She sounded sincere. That somehow made it worse. How much is the prescription? He asked. Olivia hesitated. $843 this month. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Noah appeared at the bus window and waved. He looked completely unaware of the number that stood between his mother and her treatment. Olivia followed Ethan's gaze and smiled at her son. He thinks I can solve anything, she said softly. Children are funny that way. Ethan folded the letter carefully and handed it back. Something about the document bothered him far more than the price. It was not just the rejection. It was the signature at the bottom. Because the executive approval code printed beside it belonged to a department that should not have existed anymore. The bus finally pulled away from the curb, carrying Olivia and Noah toward the other side of town, but Ethan remained standing outside the pharmacy long after it disappeared around the corner. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The executive approval code on that letter continued to bother him. It belonged to a patient assistance division that had supposedly been reorganized nearly 2 years earlier. He remembered signing the restructuring documents himself. As he walked toward a nearby coffee shop, he opened his company records through a secure application and searched for the code. Within seconds, several files appeared on the screen. Ethan stopped walking. According to the system, the department still existed. Not only that, It had processed thousands of applications over the past 18 months. He stared at the numbers in disbelief. That was impossible. His assistant called a moment later. Ethan, the board meeting starts in 20 minutes. Move it. There was a brief silence. Move it, she repeated. To tomorrow morning. Is everything all right? Ethan looked at the screen again. No, I do not think it is. After ending the call, he opened another report. Then another. The deeper he looked, the more confused he became. Funding that should have gone to patient assistance programs appeared to be redirected through multiple administrative channels. The amounts were small enough to avoid attention individually, but together they represented millions of dollars. Ethan sat down at an outdoor table and rubbed his forehead. For years he had trusted the reports placed in front of him. Every quarter, executives assured him the programs were operating successfully. Every presentation showed positive outcomes. Every audit appeared clean. Yet one conversation outside of pharmacy was beginning to unravel a completely different story. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message from an unknown number. Ethan opened it. The message contained only a home address and a short sentence. Noah gave me your business card before the bus left. Please do not come here. Olivia. Ethan almost smiled. Somehow that request made him even more curious. He studied the address. It was located in an older section of town, nearly 12 miles away. He should have listened. He should have returned to his office and focused on responsibilities that affected shareholders and quarterly earnings. Instead, 45 minutes later, he found himself driving through narrow streets lined with aging apartment buildings. The neighborhood was clean but worn. Small front porches held faded chairs. Children rode bicycles along cracked sidewalks. Ethan eventually parked across from a 3-story brick building. He checked the address again. It matched. As he stepped out of the car, he noticed Noah sitting alone on the front steps holding a library book. The boy looked up immediately and smiled. There was no surprise in his expression, as if he had expected Ethan to come. I knew you would find us, Noah said. Ethan glanced toward the apartment entrance. Is your mom home? Noah nodded. Then his smile faded slightly. She is sleeping. He closed the book and looked directly at Ethan. She always sleeps after days like today. Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. Before he could answer, Noah added one more sentence. But she was not always like this. Noah looked down at the library book resting on his lap and traced a finger across the cover before speaking again. She used to run with me every Saturday morning. Ethan sat beside him on the concrete steps. Really? Noah nodded. 3 miles. Sometimes 4. Ethan glanced toward the apartment entrance. It was difficult to imagine the exhausted woman from the pharmacy jogging through town with a 7-year-old boy. She was fast, Noah continued. She always let me win at the end, but I knew she was pretending. A small smile appeared on Ethan's face. Sounds like a good mom. She is the best mom. Noah answered without hesitation. The certainty in his voice made Ethan wonder how much of their struggle the boy truly understood. Before he could ask another question, the apartment door opened. Olivia stepped outside. She looked surprised to find Ethan sitting beside her son. For a moment, she simply stared at him. Then she crossed her arms. I thought my text message was pretty clear. It was, Ethan admitted. I just did not follow it. Olivia shook her head. You really should have. Noah stood quickly. Mommy, I was telling him about the races. Olivia's expression softened immediately. The races? The Saturday ones. For the first time since Ethan met her, he saw genuine warmth reach her eyes. Those were a long time ago. Noah looked confused. Not that long. Olivia touched his shoulder gently. Go upstairs and finish your homework. I will be there in a few minutes. Noah hesitated, then nodded and disappeared inside. As soon as the door closed behind him, the warmth faded. Olivia sat down on the opposite end of the steps. What do you want, Mr. Carter? Ethan considered the question. A few days ago, he would have had a simple answer for almost anything. Now he was not so sure. I want to understand what happened. Olivia laughed quietly. That makes 2 of us. Ethan told her about the department code he discovered. He explained the missing funding records and the inconsistencies hidden inside company reports. Olivia listened without interrupting. When he finished, she stared across the street for several seconds. You know what is strange? She finally said. For months I kept thinking someone important would notice. Ethan did not respond. Not because I thought I deserved special treatment, she continued. I just assumed the system would eventually catch a mistake that obvious. The words settled heavily between them. Ethan looked at the worn steps beneath his feet. Maybe nobody was looking. Olivia nodded slowly. That is exactly what I started to believe. Her honesty made him uncomfortable because it felt true. He thought about the presentations, the charts, the polished reports. Thousands of numbers. Thousands of patients. Somewhere along the way, real people had become statistics. A notification suddenly appeared on his phone. It came from the internal compliance team. Ethan opened it immediately. Attached was a document he had requested earlier. As he scanned the first page, his heartbeat quickened. There was a list of executives connected to the missing funding transfers. Near the bottom sat a familiar name. Someone Ethan had trusted for nearly a decade. And beside that name was a note that changed everything. The investigation had already been opened once before. Then it had been quietly closed. Olivia noticed the change in Ethan's expression immediately. What is it? She asked. Ethan looked up from his phone, but did not answer right away. He was trying to process what he had just read. The investigation file was dated almost 11 months earlier. An internal review team had flagged unusual financial transfers connected to patient assistance funding. Questions had been raised. Reports had been submitted. Then everything had stopped. No final conclusions. No disciplinary action. No follow-up. Just a short note indicating the matter had been resolved internally. It made no sense. Mr. Carter? Olivia asked again. Ethan locked his phone. Someone looked into this before. Olivia stared at him. And the investigation was closed. A bitter smile crossed her face. Then I guess there is your answer. Ethan shook his head. No, it is not. For the first time, he sounded angry. Not at Olivia. Not at Noah. At himself. Because if an investigation had been buried, it meant the problem was not a simple administrative mistake. Someone had wanted it hidden. Olivia studied him carefully. Why are you doing this? Ethan frowned. Doing what? Spending your time here. She gestured toward the apartment building. You do not know me. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but realized he did not actually know. At first it had been curiosity, then concern. Now it felt personal, though he could not explain why. Olivia looked toward the second-floor window where Noah's bedroom light had switched on. Most people hear a story like mine and feel sorry for 5 minutes, she said. Then they move on. Ethan followed her gaze. Maybe I am not most people. Olivia laughed softly. That is exactly the kind of thing important people say. Before Ethan could respond, her phone rang. She checked the screen and immediately looked away. Everything okay? He asked. Just work. The call stopped. Then another came seconds later. Ethan noticed her hesitation. You should answer it. Olivia sighed and accepted the call. Hello. Her expression changed almost instantly. The color drained from her face. Tomorrow, she asked quietly. Several seconds passed. I understand. More silence. Thank you for letting me know. She ended the call and lowered the phone slowly. Ethan could tell something was wrong. What happened? Olivia stared at the dark screen in her hand. The grocery store reduced employee hours again. Ethan remembered she had mentioned working multiple jobs. How many hours did they cut? Olivia swallowed. All of them. Ethan felt a sinking sensation. You lost your job? She nodded. Apparently business is slow. For a moment neither spoke. Across the street, a porch light flickered on as evening settled over the neighborhood. Ethan looked at the apartment building, then at the woman sitting beside him. Medication she could not afford. Assistants that had disappeared. A child carrying responsibilities no 7-year-old should carry. And now no job. The timing felt almost impossible. Unless it was not a coincidence at all. His phone vibrated again. This time it was a confidential message from compliance. Attached was a personnel record connected to the old investigation. Ethan opened it. The former investigator had resigned the same week the case was closed. But one line near the bottom made Ethan's pulse quicken. Current employer, Brooks Community Outreach Center. Ethan turned slowly toward Olivia. Your last name is Brooks, he said. Did you ever know someone named Daniel Brooks? Olivia stared at Ethan for several seconds after hearing the name. The surprise on her face was impossible to miss. Daniel Brooks was my husband, she said quietly. Ethan felt a chill run through him. The pieces that had seemed unrelated only moments earlier suddenly began connecting. He worked at the outreach center? Olivia nodded. For years. She looked confused. Why are you asking about him? Ethan lowered his phone. Because according to this record, he was the investigator assigned to the funding review that was closed. Olivia's eyes widened. That cannot be right. Why not? She looked away toward the street. Because Daniel never worked for your company. The report says he was hired as an independent consultant. Olivia shook her head slowly. He never talked about that. The realization seemed to hit her gradually. Ethan could see old memories surfacing behind her eyes. There was a period when he spent a lot of late nights working on something, she admitted. Whenever I asked, he said it involved helping people who were being overlooked. Ethan listened carefully. Did he ever mention patient assistance programs? Olivia's expression changed. Once. She looked back at him. Just once. Ethan waited. He came home frustrated one evening and said numbers on paper can hide real people. The words landed heavily between them. Ethan had been thinking almost the same thing only hours earlier. Olivia folded her arms against the cool evening air. A few weeks later, he stopped talking about it altogether. Why? Ethan asked. I never knew. She hesitated. Then life became complicated. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Upstairs, a light switched on in another apartment. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. Ordinary sounds filled the silence. Yet Ethan felt as though he had stepped into a story that began years before he arrived. His phone buzzed again. This time the message came directly from the compliance director. 3 words appeared on the screen. Call me immediately. Ethan stood and stepped several feet away before returning the call. The director answered on the first ring. Where are you? He asked. Why? Ethan replied. Because the executive team is looking for you. Ethan frowned. What happened? There was a pause. Someone accessed archived investigation files that have not been opened in almost a year. Ethan already knew the answer. That someone was me. The director lowered his voice. Then you need to know something. The executives connected to those files are meeting tonight. Ethan's expression hardened. Without me. Apparently. Another pause followed. And Ethan, there is more. What? The director exhaled slowly. One of the names connected to the original funding transfers belongs to a current board member. Ethan looked back toward Olivia and the apartment building behind her. Everything had become bigger than a denied prescription. Bigger than accounting mistakes. Bigger than missing paperwork. Someone powerful had benefited from keeping the truth buried. As the call ended, Ethan slipped the phone into his pocket. Olivia immediately knew something had changed. What is it now? She asked. Ethan met her eyes. Tomorrow morning, I am walking into a board meeting. He paused. And somebody in that room already knows I am asking questions. The next morning, Ethan arrived at headquarters before sunrise. The glass tower that usually filled him with pride felt different now. For years, he had walked through those doors believing he understood the company he led. Now he was not so sure. By 8 o'clock, the boardroom was full. Executives shuffled reports across polished tables while assistants poured coffee. Conversations stopped the moment Ethan entered. He noticed the quick glances, the nervous expressions, the forced smiles. His compliance director had been right. People already knew he was asking questions. Ethan took his seat at the head of the table and opened the meeting without discussing quarterly earnings, stock performance, or growth projections. Instead, he placed a single file in the center of the table. The room immediately became silent. Before we discuss anything else, he said calmly, I want to talk about patient assistance funding. Several executives shifted uncomfortably. One board member adjusted his glasses and looked away. Ethan continued. Specifically, I want to know why millions of dollars intended for patients were redirected through administrative channels. Nobody answered. The silence lasted nearly 10 seconds. Finally, a senior executive cleared his throat. Those decisions were reviewed years ago. Ethan nodded. Then explaining them should be easy. More silence followed. The board member seated near the end of the table finally spoke. Ethan, with respect, we should focus on current business priorities. Ethan looked directly at him. People unable to access medication are a current business priority. The response landed harder than anyone expected. The meeting quickly became tense. Reports were requested. Explanations were offered. None of them made sense. Every answer seemed designed to avoid the real issue. Then Ethan revealed the archived investigation. Faces around the table changed immediately. One executive became pale. Another stopped taking notes altogether. The board member who had tried to redirect the conversation suddenly looked very interested in the documents in front of him. Ethan knew he was getting close to the truth. By noon, he had ordered an independent review led by an outside auditing firm. No internal supervision. No executive oversight. Complete transparency. Several people protested. Ethan ignored them. When the meeting finally ended, he felt exhausted but certain he had made the right decision. As he left the building, his phone rang. It was Olivia. For a moment, he feared something had gone wrong. "Hello," he answered. "Mr. Carter?" Her voice sounded different. Lighter. "I wanted to tell you something." Ethan stopped walking. "What happened?" He heard a small laugh on the other end. Not the tired laugh he had heard outside the pharmacy. A genuine one. "The clinic called this morning. Somehow my medication assistance was approved again." Ethan smiled despite himself. "That is good news." "There is more," Olivia said. "They said someone also arranged transportation assistance and follow-up care." Ethan looked toward the city skyline. "Sounds like somebody finally started paying attention." Olivia was quiet for a second. "Maybe." Then her voice softened. "Daniel always believed the truth would matter eventually." Ethan thought about the investigation, the board meeting, and the hidden records. "Your husband may have been right." After the call ended, Ethan looked down at his phone and noticed a new message waiting in his inbox. It contained the first findings from the independent auditors. Attached was a scanned document recovered from the original investigation. At the bottom was Daniel Brooks's signature, and directly above it was a handwritten note that changed everything Ethan thought he knew about Olivia's family. The handwritten note above Daniel Brooks's signature was only one sentence long, but Ethan read it 3 times before he fully understood it. "If this report disappears, someone should tell Olivia that she was right." Ethan leaned back in his chair and stared at the words. Olivia had been right. Daniel had believed her. And somewhere along the way, both of them had been ignored. Over the following weeks, the independent audit uncovered everything the original investigation had failed to expose. Funding intended for vulnerable patients had been quietly redirected through layers of administrative spending. Several senior executives were removed from their positions. New oversight policies were implemented. Most importantly, the patient assistance program was rebuilt from the ground up. Ethan insisted that every application be reviewed by an independent team. No shortcuts, no hidden decisions, no forgotten families. 3 months later, Ethan found himself standing outside the same neighborhood pharmacy where everything had begun. The weather was warmer now. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk, and sunlight reflected off the store windows. He had just finished meeting with local healthcare providers when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Mr. Carter." Ethan turned and immediately smiled. Noah was running toward him with a backpack bouncing against his shoulders. The boy looked taller somehow, healthier, happier. Olivia followed a few steps behind at a much steadier pace than before. Ethan noticed it instantly. She was standing straight. Her face carried color and energy that had been missing the day they first met. "Look who finally remembered how to slow down," Olivia said as Noah reached them. "I am not slow," Noah protested. "I am efficient." Ethan laughed. "That sounds like something a future chief executive officer would say." Noah grinned proudly. For a few moments they simply talked. About school, about books, about ordinary things. The kind of conversation that once would have seemed impossible. Eventually Olivia handed Ethan a small envelope. "What is this?" he asked. "A copy of Daniel's final report." Ethan looked at her in surprise. "I thought the auditors had already recovered everything." "Not everything." Olivia smiled softly. "Daniel kept his own notes." Ethan carefully accepted the envelope. Before opening it, he looked at her. He was a remarkable man. Olivia nodded. He really was. There was sadness in her eyes, but peace as well. The kind that comes when long unanswered questions finally receive answers. Noah suddenly tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Can I tell you something?" Ethan knelt slightly. "Of course." The boy looked completely serious. "Do you remember the first day we met?" Ethan smiled. "I do." Noah nodded. "I was scared." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "I know." The boy glanced toward his mother. Olivia was standing comfortably beside them, smiling in the afternoon sun. Then Noah looked back at Ethan and said the words that neither of them would ever forget. "You helped my mommy stand up." For a moment nobody spoke. Ethan looked at Olivia, then at Noah. When he first heard a small voice outside a pharmacy, he thought he was being asked to help one struggling mother. What he eventually discovered was something much larger. A hidden truth. A forgotten promise. A chance to become the kind of leader he should have been all along. And it all began because one little boy believed that important people should listen.